Hello friends, welcome to the very first episode of Deprogram Diaries. My name is Claire Marshall and I am your host. Today I'm being interviewed by one of my best friends, Sarah Little, and we are talking about one of the biggest challenges in my life, which is my dating life. So Sarah, who's known me for a very long time, will ask me questions about what was going on before, all the way back to my teenage years, and kind of the low points in my life, and then really me understanding that the problems with my dating life were not actually external, they were internal. And so we'll talk through that. We'll talk about the deprogram method, which is what we will share a lot more about in this podcast series. We'll talk about Walter Bellin, who is the man who taught me this method. He is a 90-year-old man who lives in Australia, and he was a transcendental meditation teacher back in the 1960s and has since created these frameworks that changed my life and which I now teach myself. In the next few episodes of Deprogram Diaries, I will talk to other people who have different stories than mine, but are also using Walter's frameworks to change their lives. So I really hope that you enjoy this podcast and this episode, and we'll jump right in.
My matey's first podcast.
Indeed.
I'm so honored to be interviewing you for this podcast.
I can't think of a better person to be here with me on my very first podcast.
Well, I am, of course, very excited to be a part of this with you for the first time. And I love how you're just going straight into a topic that has probably caused you some of the most pain in your life for the last 15 to 20 years.
Indeed. Yeah, let's just talk about my pain. I figured that as part of this podcast, I really want other guests and myself to be really vulnerable and authentic. I'm really excited to have one of my best friends for the last 15 years, Sarah Little, who lives in Byron Bay, Australia. I'm sitting here in Mexico. But Sarah's been one of my best friends for the last 15 years. She has seen the back end of everything we're going to talk about and really has a sense of what's changed for me. She's also the person that introduced me to the work that we're going to talk about. So, Sarah, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Maybe we can start by talking about how we met for the first time 15 years ago, which is such a crazy story. So I was in Argentina visiting one of my best childhood friends. Claire and Ariel went to college together. So we were all out for this pretty wild night, which was super fun in Buenos Aires. And then about a year or two later, I moved to San Francisco. I think it was my first weekend in San Francisco, and I was at this random house party, and all of a sudden, I see this girl, this very beautiful girl, like beelining it across the room to me, and she's like, "Oh my God, we met in Argentina," and I was like, "Oh my God, Claire, we had such a good night. Like, how are you?" So that was how we met, and I guess I'd lived in San Francisco for about 4 years until I moved to Australia, but we really became super good friends starting in San Francisco. And throughout the last 15 years, while we've lived on different parts of the world, you're probably my friend that I've traveled with the most. Whenever I would go through a breakup or needed a trip, I would always call you to see where you were, and I would come and have an amazing holiday with you. Through the years, you've also really gotten to know my friends and family here in Australia, and you've probably, out of all my friends, been my friend from abroad that's visited me the most in Australia. So you're my little world globe-trotting partner in crime. It's been great. All right, so let's get straight into it. So today we are here to talk about your biggest challenges and reoccurring patterns in your dating life and love life, which has been really beautiful for me to see how you used to be. And then, of course, the changes I've seen, especially in the last 2 years, but even in the last year is where I've seen the most growth from you. So I guess from my perspective, we've been friends for a long time, but the old Claire used to pretty much just be boy obsessed, dating obsessed. Every call was a passionate call about whoever your new love interest was that was pretty intense. Typically it would drive most of the conversation kind of right out of the gates. But it was always a very similar story. I met this guy and I think I'm in love. The energy was very intense. And when I would start asking questions about how long have you known the guy and tell me more, typically you would have maybe been with the guy for 2 to 3 weeks. And as we would dig in, not all, but many times there would be some red flags just around maybe how quickly the relationship was going, or really around this guy probably not being the right guy for you. So it was a lot of just up and down with different men you were dating. And it was almost like every time we were having a call, maybe once a month or once every 2 months, it was like either going up on the highs of the relationship or the very tough downs, and really just kind of being your world for most of our conversation. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's a pretty good description. When I think back about my dating life, I think when I was younger, my friends referred to me as boy crazy, which wasn't that big of a deal. It was kind of like a joke. As I got older, I started to notice that the patterns I was experiencing in my dating life were mostly unique to me. I would notice that my friends weren't going through these crazy ups and downs. Once a friend said to me, "It seems like you fall in love 3 or 4 times a year." And I was like, whoa, yep, that's fair. It was this constant cycle of feeling really obsessed when I met somebody, even though I didn't know them, and simultaneously terrified. I'd feel obsessed and then also terrified that the person was going to get to know me and leave me, which was the way that the pattern went on. I would break up with somebody because they weren't actually the kind of person I wanted to be with, or they would break up with me, and then I would get right back on a dating app. I didn't like to spend any time alone. That felt really scary. And when I broke up with someone, I would often move countries and start dating somebody new. It was a great distraction method and never really allowed myself to feel or to process a breakup.
Yes. And I also noticed that a lot about the moving the countries too. That's a great parallel that you've just drawn. And also sometimes moving countries for someone who maybe wasn't necessarily aligning with the type of person that I kind of knew you wanted to be with. So yes, that was definitely a pattern. Even when we would be in person on a trip together, or you were visiting me or I was visiting you, and we would go to some type of social setting, there was also a huge focus from you around walking into a party and literally dialing in and being like, who's it going to be at this party that I need to try to create and have some type of love connection with. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And so much energy was poured into that for me over my life. A number of my friends would agree that I needed male validation like I needed air. When we were in person or talking on the phone, that took up most of my headspace. I'm able to talk about it with a decent amount of awareness now. My awareness levels went something like 10 years ago. All men are jerks. I keep choosing the wrong people. I remember one of my best friends said, "Claire, where do you even find these guys?" And I'm like, where are you not finding these guys? Because it just felt like this pattern. Maybe it was 3 years ago, I was listening to a podcast with Elizabeth Gilbert, and she was defining what she called love addiction, which I'd never heard of. She was talking about how when she gets into relationships, she feels like she's in a car with her foot on the pedal, just driving the car over a cliff, like waving as the car goes over the cliff. I remember I was on a hike in Asheville, North Carolina. She's defining this problem that I've had for years that I haven't been able to put words to. It felt like I was consistently in a car about to drive over a cliff in full awareness of what I was doing and not being able to stop, just over and over again.
And of course, during this time, you were living all over the world. I think you were living in over like 75 different countries over this period of time. And then you moved back to the US and you found yourself in LA.
I had lived around the world for 10 years, and then I decided that it was time to come back and attempt a normal life in California. And I was going to come back and settle down and find a partner.
Yep, I remember all.
I moved back to California, and one of the first places I went was Los Angeles, which was an interesting choice because I didn't realize how insecure I was. I was pouring a lot of energy into being rich. I wanted to have my title be CEO. I wanted to put that on my dating profile. I bought a new car. I poured money into all the latest beauty trends in LA, which there were a ton. And I was completely focused on trying to make myself the most desirable match that I could. And I wouldn't say that this was super conscious, but living in LA made it worse.
There was something about that particular city with all of the wealth and the models and the beautiful people that really made some of these insecurities in me rear up in that city, right?
Yeah, I just felt like I would be single for the rest of my life. My biggest fear was being thrown in my face every time I went to the grocery store. I was pouring all this energy into trying to be more like that, trying to look more like a model, trying to be a CEO, trying to drive a nicer car. I had these two big breakthrough moments there. One was that I just remember thinking, this can't be the way to happiness. Me being more beautiful or more rich doesn't have anything to do with contentment for me. So that was a big shift around how I was spending my time and energy.
Yeah.
And the second major rock bottom moment was I was dating this guy for 6 weeks. I felt completely obsessed with him, and I would have been mortified if anybody else had known that at the time. But I remember needing a text back from him and being so addicted to my phone one day at work that I actually couldn't work. And I was running a company, so I needed to be more accountable. I realized that day I really had a problem. He wasn't someone I would even want to introduce to my friends or family or my parents. And I had so much anxiety around whether or not this person who I had just met loved me or not, whether he wanted me or not. And I felt so powerless in the situation because he wasn't texting me back. That led to me writing a list of all the men that I had dated in the previous 5 years and looking at all of them, having this big moment of awareness that the common denominator in these failed relationships is me. And so in terms of awareness, I was really clear that the problem was mine and that I really wanted to do something different and not live the rest of my life in these cycles of anguish and these situationships that ended the same way every time.
Got it. So do you feel like that was one of the first times that you were able to start recognizing that you were in and also responsible for some of these patterns you were finding yourself in?
Yeah, I think that there were different levels of awareness over my life, which were putting blame externally for a long time, just about there are no good men. You know, my friends meet good, nice men, but I don't. And then over time being like, okay, well, I'm the one who dates the crazier men because I'm crazy.
And you used to say that all the time, Claire. You were like, I know that I'm a lot. I know that I'm crazy. And as your friend, I don't think that you're crazy at all. It was just more, I could really see that you were very caught up in exactly what you had just said, this whole idea of making the relationship work and the obsession of the courtship and the newness and all of the excitement. I think it's so easy to get wrapped up in that for anyone when they first start to date someone. But yeah, I agree. So you have this sort of light bulb moment in LA. It sounds like you're probably thinking, this is maybe not the right place for me. So you decide to move to Santa Barbara to have a little bit more of a relaxing life, a relaxing pace, maybe some time to regroup and find a place where you can be a bit happier.
Yeah. I moved to Santa Barbara because it felt more relaxed. When I moved there, I stopped dating for a while completely because at that point I had acknowledged that it felt kind of like an addiction for me.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to address it because it felt like one of the most important things in my life because it's been this kind of elusive thing. And I knew I had a problem, but I didn't know what to do about it. So I started to look into ways of addressing the fact that I had issues in my dating life or issues with the way I was approaching dating.
Okay. So you've taken some time off dating and then you decide to quit your job.
Yeah. So I took some time off dating, but then I quit my job, which is probably another whole podcast. But now finally, without working 50 hours a week and being really focused on scaling a company and making more money, I, for the first time, had the chance to not be so focused externally and take a moment to do more of an inward journey. And for me, the external journey had been so intense with moving countries all the time and having this intense job and dating lots of people. And so it was a really big deal to stop that. I want to talk about other things that I had tried in terms of addressing this issue. I probably, since I was young, have had 5 or so one-on-one talk therapists. I've done ayahuasca a number of times. I've been to lots of meditation retreats. I've done ketamine therapy a number of times, psilocybin journeys. I felt like I had really tried everything when you and I had the next conversation.
You were doing it all, looking for answers and looking for peace. And I think that that's a pretty common thing to do. I certainly did that to an extent myself. I think it was really interesting, the timing of this, because I had been a part of centered meditation where I was really starting to do a lot of deep inner growth work on myself during this time. So when we were talking, I think that you could really start to notice a big change in me, especially with the way that I was approaching some of my own personal patterns in relationships. And I remember it was probably over a series of calls. You would say, wow, what are you doing? This, for me, I think exactly what I said to you was, out of all of my friends, I think that you're one of the people that could probably benefit the most from some of this work, especially in regards to your relationship patterns.
Indeed. And I remember when you said that to me. I think I actually remember where I was standing. And sometimes when people tell you the truth, it's like that's what really can create a pang of some pain, maybe. But I remember feeling resistance to it at first because having tried all these different methods of healing and different healing modalities, I was kind of incredulous at your change, frankly. I was like, Sarah has drank a lot of Kool-Aid, like she's using different words now. To some degree, I felt like for 15 years, we had been in the same boat,
Totally.
boat of misery. I'm like, what are you doing leaving?
The boat of looking for love and it not really working out. But then all of a sudden you're seeing these changes in me where I think for me, I was able to start approaching dating with more ease.
Self-respecting. The way that you were talking about things, I think you were talking about somebody that you were dating and just saying like, it's okay if he doesn't like me. This is really about what I'm looking for. It was a real change in perspectives that I hadn't ever heard from you before. And because you were the person that I would normally call to whinge about my dating life, it was a real change for me. When you suggested that I work with them, I had tried meditation a number of times and it hadn't worked. I'd been on lots of meditation retreats where I would feel good on the retreat and meditate and then only be able to practice 2 or 3 days when I got home. So I just didn't think it was for me. And I also just don't like people telling me what to do. So I knew that whatever you were saying was out of love. But yeah, I ended up deciding to join a program right when I quit my job. So within a week of quitting my job, I started a program with Walter.
Amazing. Walter's incredible. Okay, so you started working with Walter, and tell me more about how that was for you.
Yeah, I think I was really inspired by what I had seen in you. And that took place over the course of at least a year. It wasn't just one conversation. But yeah, I first learned to meditate using effortless meditation, which was the first and only time that I was able to keep a meditation practice. And I think that that's because it doesn't require you to get rid of thoughts. It allows for all thoughts. It feels good most of the time. So it's like something that you want to do versus something that you feel like you have to do. I felt in the group that there was a lot of inspiration when you look at the people in their lives, the people that are teaching it. I felt really inspired by Walter and by you and by other people that had been meditating effortlessly for a long time.
So what were some of the biggest shifts for you?
I came in knowing what was wrong, and I think some people feel a sense of discontentment but might not know why. I knew that I was responsible for the way these relationships were going and how much anguish it created in my life. One of the first shifts was that for years in therapy, the therapist and I had talked about my relationship with my mom, who was very strict when I was growing up. I was a very energetic and curious kid who grew up having to go to church 3 times a week. And in therapy, I always thought that a lot of my issues came from my mom being strict and having this oppressive upbringing. But no one really ever asked me about my dad. One time a therapist said, "What about your dad?" And I said, well, he was there, but he wasn't really there. And it was a big moment for me to think about the fact that it wasn't about what he did do, but also about what he hadn't done. Having a father who was emotionally unavailable and angry a lot of the time.
I think that when you think about the work that we were doing, it's really around getting to the core of the patterns that you seem to be experiencing throughout your adult life, right? Past and even now. So maybe you initially joined the program or got involved because you had this reoccurring problem that you were facing with relationships. But then when you start getting into what's sitting underneath of that, it actually doesn't have anything to do with relationships at all. It has to do with things that were happening in your childhood with the family dynamic, with your mom, with your dad. And now, because of that, that's starting to play out into your adult life and impacting your relationships, the need for attention from men that was being driven through things that had happened in your childhood.
Right. Well put. And some of the light bulbs I had in the inner growth work with the program were about the things I had come to believe about myself as a child that were based on my environment, and how those beliefs that I interpreted as a child became recurring patterns. Like the neural pathways got well trodden. I wanted to be vulnerable on this podcast and talk about what those were. In having an emotionally absent father, I now can see that I was really vying for his attention and love. It was something that I never got. Later in life, I'm still trying to fill this hole, this belief that I'm ultimately unlovable, which is something that I came to believe about myself as a kid. And it wasn't just my dad, and this is not about blaming my father. who is a wonderful person. It has to do with me at the age 5, 6, 7, what I'm interpreting about my environment and what I'm making that mean about me. This belief or fear that I'm never going to be loved and that I'm unlovable is something that started when I was young, which now feels really clear when I think back on how that happened. And then is something that's sitting in my subconscious, which is what drives the sense of powerlessness or me feeling terrified every time I meet somebody and enter into a relationship. I'm desperately seeking love in some form or validation, and simultaneously knowing that it's not going to last that long because I fear not being able to be loved. As we got further into the inner growth work and with a continued practice of effortless meditation every day, the deficiency that I felt, or kind of like the hole in my psychology that was left in not feeling loved when I was a kid, over time has felt more and more full. I've always thought about other relationships being the most important, like with my mom or different partners that I've had. But I think I increasingly became to understand that the most important relationship in my life is with me. And the sense of powerlessness that I have felt going into relationships, just knowing that anything that feels good is going to end. And you can imagine how I would behave in relationships like that if that's what I'm thinking in the background. But just feeling a lot more calm and a lot more kind of a sense of I've got me. And for many years, I didn't understand what it meant to feel self-love. I'd been to some self-love workshops. I didn't want to stand in the mirror and say, I love you, I love you. I didn't feel like it was creating any lasting change. But between the inner growth work and the meditation over the last 2 years, I feel really differently in my body going into relationships. For a long time, I carried with me that I'm too wild, too old, too whatever to be loved, which is something from childhood as well. And that bit I was a bit more conscious of, but it wasn't until I started working with centered meditation in the last couple of years that I was really able to understand and kind of objectify these cycles and understanding what was going on in my subconscious that kept these things running without me wanting it. Another thing I didn't mention was that throughout this whole time, what I really wanted was love and connection. What I really wanted was a long-term partner. And I kept myself in these cycles, which kept me, away from anything or could have had long-term potential. And also I wasn't ready for it because I didn't believe about myself that I was worth more.
Yeah. So I think you bring up a really interesting point here, Claire, around the connection, because of course I've been through all of this with this work. So the connection of the relationship with yourself. And I want to know, did you have a defining moment, or what was that process like for you to really build that self-love where you actually love yourself so much that being alone and not being in a relationship doesn't feel so scary or uncomfortable?
Yeah, honestly, I'm still somewhere in that process. It's not like I don't still get triggered or that I don't still want to go on fun date weekends or things, but it's been a very incremental process. And I would attribute a lot of that to a daily practice of meditation, which I never would have imagined that these two things had anything to do with each other. But I remember I lived in Bali for some time and going to these self-love workshops and being a little bit of an eye roll, because I'm like, what does that even mean? Just because I was so far from it. I didn't feel it in my body and I didn't really understand what it meant, and because I hadn't experienced it. And it also, when I heard other people talking about it, kind of pissed me off because it felt like something elusive and something that was not available to me. Also, long-term relationships felt like something that wasn't available to me. But the process of coming to really enjoy and honor and love myself and love spending time alone and kind of rebuilding myself after I've been through so many of these cycles has been something that I've felt incrementally. And there are just like these little sparkly moments that show me how far I've come about just choosing myself in relationship and not worrying about what the other person thinks about me. And I think part of the most embarrassing part of all of this is that I have the assumption that most humans, especially at our age, are walking around the planet with a good amount of groundedness and calm and self-love and of, you know, putting themselves first or considering themselves in a way that I haven't. But I feel like I wanted to record this because I think that there's a case or there's a chance that some people don't feel that way in the way that I haven't, even though I feel like I've shown up fairly confidently on the outside.
Yes, totally. I think that I understand what you're saying. So from an outsider's perspective, you're this beautiful, confident, free-spirited person, but on the inside, many times you were suffering. And I think that's really common for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely suffering, definitely a lot of anxiety, definitely questioning myself. And the things that we're talking about too aren't just related to me in relationships. This also has to do with me and how I react to my boss, or, you know, I no longer have a boss, which is great. But it also has to do with things like, I mean, building a better relationship with yourself affects everything, affects every single relationship, all of my friendships, my ability to connect with my parents, with my sisters.
So to that point, you mentioned that you were trying everything to feel better or to have more successful relationships, which included therapy, ayahuasca, workshops. I think that, Claire, this is a really common thing that people do, which is feeling discomfort, feeling maybe like there's something broken inside of them, and going to external factors to try to feel better. Now that you have started to heal some of the things that have been essentially broken for you in here, do you find yourself still being called to do things like ayahuasca or some of these other kind of external things or avenues to try to fix what's broken?
Yeah, well, I feel less broken. I don't feel all put back together, but I feel a hell of a lot different than I did 2 years ago in all areas of my life. I did go through a big breakup 6 months ago, and I did ayahuasca a couple months afterwards and found that it really helped me kind of like shift my perspective on things. I think that these sorts of medicines have a really important place. I think there's a difference whereas like with psilocybin journeys, ketamine therapy, ayahuasca, I'm getting these big downloads and big insights while I'm in the journeys. Whereas with the meditation and inner growth work, it's something that's changing me internally so that I react different over time. For me, it's like a long-term sustainable journey with the meditation versus something that just feels like an insight or a perspective shift or something like that. That's more of a one-time thing.
Got it.
For me.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm sure
it's almost like
differently.
It's almost like the ayahuasca now doesn't feel like this thing you need to do that's going to like solve up the problem. You're now more having experiences where you're actually having like, you're able to just go deeper and get kind of to using your words, these downloads of like greater insights.
Well, it feels a little bit more like I'm able to be my own therapist.
Okay, cool.
Versus, yeah, I felt like in therapy, it was Groundhog Day. I was showing up with the same problems. I mean, you know how it was. You saw me during that time.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing is that I've always loved to drink. And yeah, it's interesting that in the last year that I'm not white knuckling stopping drinking, that I've been able to give up alcohol, and not entirely. I would say like 95% of what I've been drinking before, in a way that hasn't been difficult. Like I've tried to quit drinking in the past, and I've really felt like I was white knuckling it. And over the last year, it's been a lot easier.
Okay. Great. And why do you think it's been easier?
I think that as humans, when we feel uncomfortable, we're looking for something, whether it's like you're tired or you feel a pang of sadness or a pang of loneliness or of anger or whatever, like we're always looking for something to distract or deflect or change the state that is uncomfortable. And most people are doing that with marijuana, with a glass of red wine, with sex, with travel, with exercising excessively. I mean, and something I see a lot of is people doing that with work, with just pure distraction. Like if you're feeling uncomfortable, just distract yourself. And so I think that with meditation, you're able to ride those uncomfortable moments and anchor back to a place of calm, which makes me less likely to reach for alcohol to like shift my state or make me feel better.
It's that more kind of calm baseline that you experience when you start to have a regular meditation practice.
And something Walter says is that we're doing this work. It's like doing all this work on us internally so that our external lives change versus trying to do it the opposite way. Trying to do a bunch of stuff externally so that we feel differently. But ultimately, this has been a lot about me feeling a lot less anxious inside, just more grounded and calm in day-to-day living. It's just like living in my head and my body is a more pleasant experience than it used to be.
Great. I love that. As your friend who's been able to witness this journey for you, I have seen a huge transformation in you. Just the calmness that you're bringing to conversations about relationships or men that you're dating. You're a completely different person. You are calm. It feels to me that you're seeing things more clearly. You're also very clear on what you want. It has been really beautiful for me to see in you. It's easier said than done. Everyone's like, the most important relationship is with yourself, but it is 100% true. And I can really see that in you now, where you're able to really clearly identify where you're at. And if that means that this new guy that you're dating isn't the right guy, or the current person you're in the relationship with maybe isn't the right long-term partner for you, you're able to move through that process with a lot more ease. Not to say that it's still not difficult. Of course it is. But that, for me as your friend, is I just keep coming back to the word, like the calmness around it all has been the biggest shift that I've seen in you, which warms my heart. It's been really nice to see you living with more peace and also being okay to be single and not in a relationship.
That's a huge difference for me because it's always been something that I've felt like I needed. The last 6 months I have been single. That's been amazing to have all this headspace back that was formerly given to different people. I do think this work helps you see yourself more clearly and see others more clearly so that I'm able to more calmly go into things and assess what's best for me versus my perspective for much of my life was really about what's their perspective. How much do they like me? How long can I keep somebody's attention? And yeah, it's really changed how my body feels on the inside. As Walter says, the inner growth work is designed to be the quickest way to identify what's driving negative behavior patterns or things that have a negative outcome that you can't stop doing. I wanted to come on today and talk about this thing that's been a really shameful part of my life, because as I've become more aware of it, it was really frustrating knowing that I was keeping this thing going that I couldn't stop and didn't understand. I think maybe my dating patterns are unique to me, but the concept of having something in your life that you don't know why you continue doing something or where your reactions or behavior is coming from is not unique to me. And so I wanted to vulnerably describe an example of how this has worked in my life today.
You also mentioned your parents earlier. So I would love to hear more about what that relationship is like with your parents now that you have done all of this inner growth work on yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think you brought up something earlier, just that the depth of our friendship has changed. We're able to get past a lot of the superficial things that we've talked about in the past and really be able to connect with each other in a way that feels vulnerable and authentic and honest, and how we want to show up for each other in a way that feels a lot more mature than we were.
And I'm not putting that all on you, by the way. Willing participant also, I'm sure, at that time.
I think the work has allowed me to talk more in depth with both of my parents and to approach conversations with them that I haven't been able to have in the past, now from a place of calm and a place of love. It's really helped me talk further with things that have kind of been swept under the rug in our family. It feels like it's opened up a lot of avenues to understand both my mom and my dad better, about how they were raised, about how they felt when we were growing up, about how they feel now. And I just want to say that they are both very loving, well-meaning people who sacrificed a lot for me. So I love my parents. The inner growth work and going back and looking at things in your childhood is not about finding people to blame or to confront people about things, but really just about understanding what sort of things live in your subconscious about the way that you see yourself and where did that come from.
So amazing. Okay, cool. Okay, one last thing that I want to talk about is, what was the biggest change that you saw in yourself after your last breakup and how you managed that process? Because I'm asking you this question because I saw a huge change in you, and I want to know if you felt like you saw the same change.
There were a bunch of things that I was journaling about when that was happening. And yeah, I went through a breakup about 6 months ago that was really sad. And I think it was so sad because I hadn't ever really experienced a breakup before, in that when I was breaking up with people, like I said, I would often move countries or date somebody else. And this time I didn't move countries. I wasn't drinking. So there were no substances making me feel better. There was nothing to distract me in terms of other men or a new setting. So I really had to sit in it for the first time and really experience the grief that I was going through. And I think one of the biggest changes, well, one was that I sat in it and I didn't run from it, which was huge, because what you run from stays in you, and you're going to have to deal with it at some point, I think. But I think one of the biggest things was that I didn't go into this very self-deprecating mode. I didn't make it mean something about me. I think that when I look back, it was a 1.5-year relationship. When I look back on that, I'm able to think about all the things about it, which were lovely and great. And I wasn't in pain about him not wanting me, or what was wrong with me, that the relationship didn't work. And historically, I would have been in a big loop about what was wrong with me and what I needed to fix and things like that.
Yeah. And I think from my perspective, Claire, the way that you were able to go through the process of the loss of the relationship, and then moving, really sitting with your emotions in I think, a really healthy way, which to your point was not running away or moving countries or like not dealing with it. Like you really leaned in and you really dealt with that breakup. And as a result, it was only 6 months ago. Like, I'm sure that you still have moments where you're feeling some discomfort and some sadness and some pain around it. But the way I've seen you move through that breakup and really deal with things in an appropriate way has been really incredible. Just like every time we would talk, you would always just sound that like little bit better. And I could just really feel that you were really moving through that breakup in a really healthy way. So that has been another really big change that I saw in you, was really how you process and manage that breakup.
Yeah, I feel proud of that as well.
Yep.
I feel proud of how it's gone. And I think in the wake of this breakup as well, it's given me more confidence for just going into relationships in general. It's like, it's going to be okay, and I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm baseline okay, whether I'm with him or not, or even though I was extremely sad and definitely like sat on the couch out here for a couple months and cried. Yeah. I also knew that I was going to be okay. Whereas, in the past I would have felt differently.
That's right. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway, is that your baseline, knowing that you will get through this, you will be okay, where the old you didn't really see that as a possibility during, those moments of breaking up. And I think it's like what Walter says. I remember he talks about how with the meditation and of course with the inner growth work, how of course you're still going to feel pain and you're going to go through emotions when big things happen in your life, a breakup being included. But it's really the way that you're able to really more practically get through it in a more appropriate time, and then kind of bounce back to it and sort of get, continuing with life afterwards, is with much more ease. And I do believe it's a little bit quicker. Would you agree?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely an element of resilience that I've felt growing along with these feelings of self-love. And I'm even noticing right now that as I say the word self-love, it's something that makes me feel a little bit cringe because of how I've felt about it my whole life.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
I didn't think that I was ever going to change because this had gone on for so long. Even though this is a really embarrassing story to share online, I hope that by sharing this and being honest about the way things have been for me and how I'm just now at the age of 41 coming into being able to approach these things with calm, peace, and clarity, that this sort of transition is possible for other people as well. Even though it would have been really nice to be 20 years old and gone through all of this and been able to approach dating from a very grounded, clear, calm perspective.
But here we are. And you know what? I've been through a similar thing. I wish I would have found this work earlier in my 20s. How different would my life be? But some people go their whole lives without doing the work to try to feel more happiness and have the life that they want to live, and coming back to that person that that they truly are. So I'm really proud of you. It's never too late to make changes. Maybe you feel like you would have started it earlier, but I think it's incredible that you're doing it now and that you're already seeing such a positive impact in your life. The future is bright, my friend.
Thank you. Well, Sarah, thanks so much for coming on and talking with me about our friendship and things that you've seen. I really appreciate you being here.
Love you. Bye.